And we are back on the Morgan Streetman Show. And Morgan, you and I talk about how fortunate it is that we've had Governor DeSantis to get through the pandemic and the way that he fights for our rights and for the Constitution. And what else is important is we don't have this surge in crime that we see across the country in other pockets, for example, in New York and in Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got a DA out there in Los Angeles, George Gascon, who is a funded and hand-picked DA, somebody who George Soros hand-picked for that job. And remember, George Soros' whole idea is that the country is an evil country, that we should have social justice in the form of essentially not enforcing criminal laws, releasing people without bail, and using that to somehow effect a social change, although it's unclear what that results in other than more crime. Because that's really what we see. We don't see this vaunted social change that they say they're trying to accomplish through these reforms. What we instead see is we see more crime. And, it's just an economic reality that when you incentivize something or you decrease the disincentives for it, that's another way to incentivize something is decreasing the disincentives, you're going to get more of it. So if we decrease the disincentives for crime, we're going to get more of it. So if we make it less bad to be a criminal, if we don't put you in jail for quite as long, we don't require you to do quite as much, then you're going to get more crime. You're going to get more criminals. This is just a natural law that occurs in any system of human interaction. And it's just simply that incentives matter. So what have they done in L.A.? Well, we just heard a story about how they dropped charges against a Chinese Communist Party-linked election company that was operating inside Los Angeles County for the elections and shipping worker data overseas. Now, they've dropped those charges. Here's another glaring example of it, and this is what you're going to get more of. And, folks, this is not what people want. This is not what you want. It's not what I want. I don't even need to take a poll to come to that conclusion. But last week in L.A., there was a young person, 22 years old, who drove his car into a group of sheriff office cadets and other law enforcement folks who were all training together. They were out for their morning run. And this person who was driving an SUV, apparently on the wrong side of the road, and then swerved into the group of about 75 cadets. And the numbers of injured ranged from 10 to 25. I don't know that it's exactly clear. I think some of them weren't injured that badly by it. But, there were 5 of them that wound up in critical condition. 4 had moderate injuries, and then another 14 had minor injuries. So there was something like 25 total cadets that were injured there, some of them very seriously injured, out for their morning run in training. And then what do? What do they do to this criminal? I mean, this driving your car into crowd stuff, can there be a more egregious? I mean, I suppose starting a fire in a theater or a crowded building, that's pretty egregious, but driving your car purposefully, and by the way, they already determined this guy did it on purpose. He passed his blood alcohol test. They've already determined.
I was wondering why.
There was I could think of a few reasons, right? I could think of this fervor that has been built up in the country, this anti-law enforcement fervor that would lead to things happening like what happened during the BLM riots, where you had a couple and we told you about these folks, a couple of lawyers, young lawyers up in New York, firebombing a police cruiser. They've just received their punishment. And by the way, compared to what's happening to folks that, lingered near the front of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, these folks are getting punished with an absolute slap on the hand. They firebombed the police cruiser. Well, listen, Morgan, why are you making such a big deal about it? There was no police actually in the cruiser. I mean, why are you making it a big... Just starting a random fire in a city is not a big deal? I mean, were they sure there was no police officer in the cruiser, or were they just firebombing it and, hey, they got lucky? I mean, I don't know, but I know those riots were out of control. There was a lot of damage and violence that was done, and we used to prosecute violence, but now we don't. So we got a guy like this 22-year-old out in Los Angeles, Nicholas Joseph Gutierrez, who runs his SUV into a crowd of about 75 sheriff's office and other law enforcement cadets who are out for their morning run training, seriously injures at least 5 of them, and it really doesn't matter if it was 1, 5, or 10. The point is, an act like this, what kind of a person commits an act like this? And is this someone you want free and out on the streets, perhaps in another vehicle, driving around looking to do this kind of thing again? I mean, when you commit an act like this, do you do it with the idea that you're going to wind up back on the street? Or do you think, wow, if I do something like this, I'm going to go to jail for a long time. I might not ever get out.
Yeah, there's no deterrent.
You might kill somebody.
Yeah.
Well, this guy's out already. He's out, no bail. Get that. He has been released, no bail. Did you hear that, Pat George? No bail. He's released. Nicholas Joseph Gutierrez, 22 years old, from California, drove his SUV into a crowd of police, recruits, sheriffs, law enforcement while they're training, cadets, and he's now released without bail.
That doesn't make sense.
What sense does that make? Don't we need to hold somebody like this in jail? I mean, I just don't understand it, but this is what you're seeing, and you're seeing it all across the country in places where these Soros-funded prosecutors have taken over. Now, I see we've got a caller. Ian. All right, let's have it. Ian, welcome to the Morgan Streetman Show. Hang on. Oh, did you hang up? All right. Having a little trouble with the phones here. Well, anyway, Roxanne's working on the phones. I was absolutely enraptured by what she's trying to do by the phones there, thus the pause. But she's working to get the caller to where you, the folks who are listening, can actually hear him. We can sort of hear him on our phone. Let's see if we got him.
I think we got him now.
Ian, are you there?
Yeah, how do you hear me now?
Okay,
Oh,
we got you now, brother. Thank you for calling. Why don't you tell us what you were... I heard you were in the middle of saying something. Go ahead.
Yeah, 2 quick points. It makes perfect sense from a strategic and tactical point of view because I am firmly convinced that the elites, which is the monopolists, the super capitalists, the crony capitalists, the quasi-socialists, they're not free enterprisers, are practicing chaos theory on us. The more chaos, dissension, they can divide and conquer, and they can rule. When they've got everybody running around going, how many times do you hear it's crazy, it's crazy? That's a common expression now because they made it crazy. That's point number one. Point number two, those attorneys up in New York City, with the firebombing.
Right.
Not only was it anarcho-tyranny. I told you about this about a month ago, anarcho-tyranny.
That's right.
The anarchy is for them. They get to break the law and no consequences. The tyranny is for us, the silent majority. That's a perfect example of anarcho-tyranny, what happened up there. Not only did they get let off with a slap on the wrist, the legal community, the New York liberals, the limousine liberals, the Upper West Side liberals, and I'm from up there, rallied around those people. They're not only going to get no consequences, they have a career. They're a cause celeb up there, okay? That's how bad it's gotten. So we are right now, I believe, we are the victims of chaos theory by the elites. And it's not just George Soros that's bankrolling these prosecutors and buying these elections. There's a whole bunch of them. He's just the one that, that's been identified, but there's more than him.
Well,
so that's my 2 cents worth for this.
I think you're exactly right about that, and we often try to remind folks about that. Soros is just the guy out front, right? He's the easy target because he's the one.
Yeah, he's riding point. Yeah,
right. But it's got to be a much bigger group than him, and who do we look to? And I think you threw out some of the ways that they've been described at the beginning of your call. We have to look to some of these international financiers. We look to the big businesses. We look to the billionaires, and we try to say, what are they trying to accomplish? And you made the point. They're trying to accomplish chaos where, and this is very similar when we read the psychology that was applied, and I know it was a work of fiction, but it was really prescient, and that's the psychology applied in the book 1984. So you really ultimately wind up not being able to figure out what's going on and having nothing to anchor your mind to except for what the party says or the state says is the truth. And we heard that during COVID. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, one other thing. Everybody's running around screaming socialism, communism, all this. We're going socialist and communist. Not going to happen. They're using the communist tactics are brilliant. They're using the communist tactics and the socialist tactics, but that's not their objective. I believe their objectives, they want to make this country and this world like the old West Virginia or the Kentucky coal mine with the company store, or the silver mine in Nevada, or the copper mine in Butte, Montana, where you had to live in the company store's house. You had to buy your provisions from them. In other words, they want to own everything. They're not for free enterprise that we know of typically. They want monopolists they want to own everything. They want to be the company store. It's kind of a new form of serfdom they want to put us in. And what is the biggest obstacle to serfdom? It's the middle class.
Well,
that's where this is all targeted against us.
You're exactly right, Ian. We're running up on a hard break, but just remember, the Great Reset, you'll own nothing and be happy. We'll be right back on The Morgan Streetman Show. Thank you for listening to The Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.